Hi, today I want to talk about Star Wars. Well, not quite the kind of Star Wars that you're thinking about. Um, Recently, my second son, my younger son, was going through a period of rapid growth spurts. So sometimes when a child is going through a period of rapid growth spurts, um, sometimes there are sleep disturbances that comes along with it. So perhaps if your child was sleeping fine and all of a sudden you notice that they're getting in the middle of the night, they can't go back to sleep, or they can't easily fall asleep, or that they have anxieties about going to sleep. So this was happening with my younger son at 8 years old. I mean, it's happened to him before, but when he was sleeping just fine and he's getting into a period of like, uh, I guess I could only call it sleep anxiety, then I decided that I was going to do something about it. But I was no expert myself. So I decided to check in with my intuition because, like, I am no expert, but there's a part of me in my heart that I call my inner wisdom, which I also help people connect to their own inner wisdom. But there's a place in my own heart, in my own inner being, that knows more than I do. So I decided to uh, have a chat with my inner wisdom and see if I can help my son. So one of the first things that came up is that my sons all love their daddy very much. And so my husband actually had a lot of issues with sleep when he was younger. Um, he had to you know, sleep a certain way to fall asleep. There was some anxiety about going to sleep. And also prior to our meeting, he was having issues falling asleep. So when my son was starting to have sleep issues, he very much like when my son was like, Daddy, in the middle of the night, my husband's there and he's being such a great dad. He's like staying by his side. And my son would be saying, Oh, could you stay with me for a while? Like in the middle of the night. Um, or, an hour after going to bed, he gets up. He's like, I can't sleep. Can you stay with me? Now, it is not an unreasonable request, but if it becomes like a habit or something like that, right? It can really wreak havoc in the parents' lives. For example, like, oh, the child might think, okay, if I get up in the middle of the night and call daddy, right? Someone's gonna come and lay beside them, or they just come and lay in the parents' bed, and the effect for the parents is huge. You just maybe you were sleeping just fine, and then you had to get up in the middle of the night and losing quality sleep, and you still had to function the next day, and then the cycle repeats again the next night. So after that, I decided to spend some time to connect with my inner wisdom and find out, what is the best way to help my son. And one of the things that I always say they, because I don't think of my inner wisdom. I could say it's my inner wisdom, but I feel like it comes from a place that's beyond me and beyond my identity. That every human being has that ability to connect to this infinite source of wisdom. So I just say they as a way of referring to this wisdom my instead of my inner wisdom all the time. So I got the guidance that says that my husband had quite a bit of issues growing up and having sleep issues. So when when my son calls daddy and daddy goes to help him out, and daddy kind of feeds into the anxiety because daddy had anxieties about sleep himself when he was younger. So basically, the suggestion was for me to take over because I didn't really have that kind of problem. Not that I can remember, but I don't usually have issues falling asleep. So basically, mommy had to take over. Like most mommies in the world, I think most kids call mommy instead of daddy. It's just the other way around for our house. Um, I guess, daddy's the good cop and mommy's the bad cop, maybe. Um, so basically, I was to take over in putting him to sleep or like helping him. And also, in the middle of the night, if he can't sleep, then that would be me getting up, right? So the first night I took over, he was crying after he couldn't fall asleep after 45 minutes trying. So instead of going to his bed, I asked him to come out to another bed. That's not my bed and not his bed. Because I don't want to have an association that I have to be in his bed in order for him to sleep, or he has to be in my bed in order to sleep. Because people can kind of start, let's say he comes to my bed and fall asleep, and then he'll be like, I can't fall asleep on my own bed, I must fall asleep in your bed. Or if I go to his bed and help him, and he would say, oh, I can only fall asleep because you're in my bed, right? So we have a separate mattress with a blanket and pillows, and I just said, okay, come lay down. And I said, well, what is it that's preventing you from falling asleep? And he said, well, when I fall asleep, I see these monsters and it's making me really scared, and I can't fall asleep. And I was like, monsters? Because, well, in my world, I don't take monsters lightly, because a child can see things that adults cannot. So who am I to say that if they're real or not, right? Because I definitely seen my own share of monsters and interesting creatures in my youth, and I know that it is very much real for the child. And so I said, okay, well, what do they look like? And then he's like, I don't know, I can't describe them. So as I was asking him questions, I realized that I can use some of my work of meditation and visualization to help my son. So I asked him to imagine that he's surrounded by a bubble of white light to protect him from any sort of outside influences, like outside energetic influences that is not part of his spiritual space or energetic space. And then I asked him to imagine that there was a light at the center of his heart that's like the source of all his wisdom. Just to set it up before I continue to ask him more questions, because sometimes we ask people more questions, especially asking a child to describe a traumatic experience. Sometimes it's good to set up the energy space first, because children are very sensitive to energies, and especially for some subset of kids that are even more sensitive. So then I said, okay, I'll just ask you a few questions and you just tell me the first thing that come up, right? So I said, are these monsters from Earth or not from Earth? And then he's like, not from Earth. I said, okay, are they like nice or not nice? Not nice. And so, at 8 years old, and that's all I want to get into, like just for me to figure out sort of where he's at with the monsters that he's experiencing. So then I thought, okay, well, I had this inspired thoughts, and I know the inspired thoughts always come from my own inner wisdom when I'm like doing this work. And I said, okay, well, let's try something to tell the monsters to go away, shall we? And he's like, okay, and then I said, okay, let's imagine that there's a beam of light, like laser white light shooting from this most powerful place in the center of the universe. And this big beam of light is coming through and it's zapping these monsters and vaporizing them. And he's like, oh yeah, and then the light turned into a rain cloud and rain showered them, like washed them away. And he added that himself. So I knew he was actively sort of visualizing that and actually working it. The good news is that the monsters never came back. And to this day, like, you know, I overheard him talking to his dad, and he was saying that, yeah, the monsters are gone. They haven't came back since, you know, like they're not an issue anymore. So I start to realize, oh, this would be something very interesting to try for kids to play Star Wars with their worst enemies when they're having issues with nightmares and sleep, and just like seeing unfriendly visitors, to get them to go away and to get them to learn to protect their own energetic space in a playful way. Because what I got from my own inner wisdom was that it's more important to teach a child how to manage these issues himself rather than like just staying there with him, or like making yourself as like a tool or something like that. Anyways, that's all I have to say about playing Star Wars for now. But if it might be something interesting to try. So if you have a child that sees monsters or creatures and find it hard to deal with, you're welcome to contact me or try the Star Wars method yourself and see how it goes. Bye now.